Well, good morning, everybody. If we can make a highly unusual and unfashionable early start, will give us a few more minutes, I hope, for a lengthy discussion. The panel of very distinguished speakers we have this morning, I will introduce very briefly. And there is a full CV in the write-up, which you can read at your leisure. On my right is Tan Sri Lee Kim Yew, a very, very well-known personality in property development, and of course was the founder of Country Heights, Country Heights group of companies, which has spread not just across Malaysia, but as far afield as UK and South Africa. Known as not just a developer, but a man who is well known for his thinking and his ability to analyze future trends. Also on my right is Datuk Seri Fateh Iskandar. He, of course, is associated with the very famous development company Glomac, where he has been since 1997, and still going strong, still leading the company very strong. On my left is Mr. Nabeel Hussain, Deputy Managing Director of Savills, Malaysia, has been with Savills since 2010. We were colleagues for many years. He, I think, started in a research department and worked his way up to a position where he is now in charge, primarily in charge of capital markets into and out of the country. Of course, last but certainly not least is Adzman, Shah, whose company is known as ExaStrata, right? And from the many years I've known Adzman, he's been in property, of course, in the retail industry, right? And more recently in private practice. Also somebody I regard as somebody who is a thinker and a doer. The format for this morning's session is that each of our distinguished delegates, speakers, will be given 8 to 10 minutes to air their thoughts on the topic. We will follow that with a general discussion, and that will be 15 or maybe 20 minutes now before I sum up. In the general discussion, of course, we hope for an exchange of views of speakers, but if there is anybody here who has some burning questions or feels particularly unhappy about the way that the property development industry is moving, please do speak up. It doesn't even have to be a question. It can be a point of view, which we will ask our speakers to comment on. The subject that we're going to discuss is very appropriate. You'll see that the whole of today is really focused on the future. So if we ask ourselves how we would future-proof the housing and property industry, I think it's appropriate to look at where we are after 50, nearly 60 years of this industry, which has contributed so much and so well to the economy and the fabric of Malaysia. Because how do we really, the challenges are how do we really keep abreast of technology, which is changing so fast? You know, how do we build property that people can afford to buy? It's not going to get any cheaper to deliver. What size? Where are we with? Don't forget that the backbone of the demand in the residential sector really started about 25, 30 years ago, when the average household size went from 7 per residential dwelling unit to less than 4, just under 4. And that created a huge demand for new housing. But is that going to be the way going forward? What will the average household size be in 10 or 15 years' time? And how do we research that? Is the research data adequate? Can we rely on NAPIC to provide all these answers? At the moment, if you take a critical look at our industry, we're still using, for example, the same old construction methods. Industrialized building methods, systems have been very slow to catch on. Maybe we've had it too good for too long, maybe because labor has been cheap, there has been no incentive. Is that the same now? Is it going to be the same in the future? The cycles of the property industry have been so predictable for the last 4 decades or more. Cycles are indicative of poor research. Should we have better research? Where do we get better research from on supply and demand? We're still at the mercy of the banks, because if there's no end finance, then there are no sales. Why should the property development industry be so heavily reliant on bank end financing? Is there another way? Is there another way? I don't know. Is the industry top heavy? Has it grown at the top so fast that there's very little room anymore for the younger, particularly the younger, sprightly newcomers to the industry who might just well bring some innovations that none of the big boys had ever thought of or heard of? Should we encourage, should we try very hard to bring these younger people up to become the next generation in the industry? So with those few thoughts, I'm going to turn the session over to the speakers, and I'd like to initially invite Tan Sri to give us his thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Datuk Christopher. And thank you, Tan Sri Michael Yeo and FEPSI Chairman. I'm very happy to join this morning, although it's a yearly event, especially beside the speaker, my good friend, Datuk Sri Fateh Iskandar. I want to tell a bit about my relationship with that. I know Datuk's father at the age of 20-something. His father is in Utusan, and I'm in paper business printing and in a government printer. So that shows how long we know each other. And today, not only Datuk here, I think his son also here, and my son also here. So it's 3 generations here. And I want to share this with you because I always like to look at history. I always say history is the best teacher. And we have to really learn history. And from history, we get all the experience, learn all the information, and put to start think for the future. So maybe before I join to discuss today's topic, I really like to take this opportunity to introduce a bit of myself. This year marked my 50 years come to Kuala Lumpur, October, with 100 ringgit. So I started in property before age 30. I do a lot of things. But at the age of 30, I go into the property. Of course, just cut the story short. In Malaysia, I transformed one of the biggest open cast mine into a resort. And in the early day, I start country height, where the time the land is only sale at 6 to 8 ringgit. I have to give land, I have to give infrastructure, I have to give concept, a concept. And today the land is sold at maybe 200, 250. Remember, the buyer who buy is a big capital gain for them. And they become also, their family also become, their life or their family become easier. So we find very meaningful. And of course, beside in Malaysia, also I did help to develop Cyber Jaya. You know, at the earlier multi-million corridor, where at the time we see is Mahathir have this Malaysia incorporated concept, where private sector and private sector always work together to give idea, the trend for the country, where to go. And so I will share a bit on today what I see technology. Of course, one of my things I like to share with the young people, this developer, of course I'm developer, but when I built the mines resort from Palace of Golden Horse to my corporate office and beach hotel and a very big exhibition hall, which is 1.5 million square feet, and also a shopping another 1.6 million square feet. From the day piling, I launched a 7 project together, all together average about 3 million square feet livable, and all complete in 22 months. And today, you're going to see this property I still, and also in London, I built one of the biggest building in London. It's called Excel, and I launched Excel also from construction. And when I take it was ASEAN financial crisis, I still finished the project. And of course, in South Africa, we also built a project. Today, we still own the golf course there. And now in Mauritius, I built 4,000 affordable housing for 8,000 US, and I have to complete in the speed of 6 units a day. So this is what I want to share with the young. So coming back to this topic, of course, very important if we talk about future, I think number one, like what Tan Sri Michael Yeo said, now we have a what we call unity government, which I believe as long as set on the national philosophy of Rukun Negara, I believe that, you know, can bring everybody together. And this country, for a long time, we need a few good factors. I thought the unity government is a few good factors. And of course, we hope what this unity government will provide us with a very stable condition. I think this is very important when we talk future. The country politics must be stable. Of course, in second, a lot of challenges is mentioned. When we talk about future forward, I want everybody in the hall to really take very seriously Datuk Christopher said. You see, the property developer in this country do so much. In the early year, the property developer helped to build houses. 30,000, no, 30,000, what do you call, low-cost housing. How to build 30,000 a house? Developer have provided so many for this country, you know. So the effort of a developer must be highly appreciated by the government. But do we done enough? Our association, FIAPSI and Malaysia Housing Association, have we done enough to go to every government coming up to tell them how important we are, how much we contribute to you? All the infrastructure, all the TMB substation built by who? Built by developer, not by the TMB. And we send over all the infrastructure, you know. A developer is successful, one house built, it affected 200 industry, you know, from concrete, from piling, from all the materials, and the new material also evolving. This industry is also about innovation. If a lot of material you use, nowadays the concrete also have a self-healing concrete. It's one of the 20th most important invention. So a property development progress, I believe it will account at least 2 or 3% of the national growth. So this is what we must work very close with the government, put in mind, be serious with this. Our view, our area, you have to listen. And second, just now Dr. Christopher said, I said, banking. Our today, the fate of the developer of Malaysia, our fate is not in our own skill, our own capital. Actually, it's on the whole banking. If we can build very good, but if they cannot take loan, you can't sell. Why we temper so much? Whether we have a chance to transform this? The answer is yes. See, the answer is yes. Very simple. One is developers together, have your own bank. You know, with all the this, but are we united enough to do this? So, and of course, marketing very important, you know. Besides, we must make sure how to spread local. We have to do our CSR. We must make sure to talk to government that certain price overseas people cannot touch. For one go, 1 million and above, they don't touch. And open up. There is a lot of money will come to Malaysia to buy the property. Because at the age of almost 70, I discovered Malaysia young generation of the property is much, much better than me. The lifestyle they created. A lot of them, they come here, they will buy here. Why they will go Singapore to buy a property for 10 million and still pay 3 million? What is lifestyle there? What is the uniqueness there? So all these things is actually we can think, and we have to open up the market. So marketing is very important. We cannot look at just China, thinking everything want to sell to China. But Singaporean, if you properly explain our value, I believe they will come here to buy. Why you put the money just in Singapore? You can put money here. And Indonesian, you know, Indonesian. I go to Indonesian, do a survey. If you're Indonesian, you want to buy property, you actually, they call hard pakai saja, you know. 20 years, then you extend. Here you got 99 years, you got freehold. But do we do enough effort to open up the market? And our tradition, British, you know, the British or American, you know, beside. So marketing is very important because we region, and we should look at packaging. A lot of people want to come here. If they live here, they have very good, medical checkup. Or you come, you live, I can be sure, you live in Malaysia, sure you live longer than in many other places. So all this packaging, marketing is very important. So this is what I want to share. If we think want to move forward, all these are the questions. But always we must be always maintain very confident to answer to Tan Sri, Michael, just like we answer stagnant. Yes, if we don't do anything, we'll be stagnant. So what I like to introduce is I am trying to, beside all these questions, I want to take a lead to launch a project which is called STO, meaning you digitalize the asset. I always feel that when you buy a property, you have to go to a lot of stamp, lawyer had to come in, stamp duty, title transfer, sometimes title come out so late. And I think it's an error, now a new error coming in. I think we talk about AI. Today, if you have a Seri, if last time you asked, hey, what's the exchange rate? So difficult. You just ask the Seri. Seri will tell you. And now you have this chat, the new chat GP. The AI is coming already. So we have to transform this. And when we transform this, I think the answer, this blockchain in property, I believe. So if you can show the Palace Golden Horse pictures. I'm going to, you see, Palace Golden Horse, many people say, we're not open. Actually, it never closed. COVID, until now, we always have 100 people working inside in the medical checkup on the East Wing. So I'm building now a new wing, and of course, to launch this digital property, number one, the property must be free of encumbrances. If you go to the bank, you charge your property to the bank, sorry, any innovation you have, they are not going to be decent. Just pay me first. So I think first thing, we have to have a property free encumbrances. Second, we have to get a very good trust company. Everything is put under the trust. And we STO the building, the unit. When you own enough unit, you can always go. I was talking to Ho Chin Soon, my old friend here. I said, you should upgrade yourself beside titling. Maybe we can get together to hold the trust. Because he understands the titling and can explain to the buyer. What for you want to have a title? As long as the title put in trust, you have the STO. You own the unit, you know. So I think all these are made possible, and also this will liberalize ourselves in the financing. Just over depend on the traditional financing. And the key is also, there's a word, beside the STO, I have this called utility token. So imagine when you put your money in a bank, the bank give you 2.5%. They take the money and loan, and then leverage many, many times. Utility token, when you buy this property, I give you 10% utility token. But your utility token, you can stay at my Palace Golden Horse, or everything and you, all the club. And believe me, a lot of this buyer is actually a buyer who not need the property. Actually, we are the business that people need. Everybody need the house. But when you want the bungalow, you want the lifestyle, it's a totally different ball game in the property business. So I believe that digitalized property, STO, going to a new type of bank, a new type of investment bank, and building the trust. But the most important thing, the change here is everything must be backed by asset, and make sure we pay our tax honestly, pay our tax honestly, and get the support of the government. And I believe this idea, I just want to make it work, one idea, and all of you in this room, you are welcome to join me. And make buying and selling property didn't have to go to the normal hassle by embracing A, B, C, D, E. That's what I always call A mean AI, B mean blockchain, A, B, C means crypto, D mean digital, E mean e-commerce. So that's what I have to share. And in the very simple is, if you think about what I want to share with you, first, think history, think experience. Second, we have to work with government. We have to work with the bank. We have to work with many parties and come out innovation. I always think property is an innovation business. So with all those words, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tan Sri. I think was, is, and always will be a true visionary. I'm going to give the floor to Datuk Sri FD and ask him to give us his thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you, Datuk Chris, Mr. Michael, Dr. Firdaus, my distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh, and a very good morning. Here we are at the Malaysian Housing Property Summit. We've been asked to share our views where the property, housing, and real estate industry is currently and where we're heading in the next short to medium term. First of all, I think all of us would agree that the Malaysian real estate industry has been in a very challenging situation since 2016. I think that's a fact. Since 2016, you can see that property prices have not gone up. If it's gone up very, very little. It's been fairly stagnant, and we are faced with a lot of challenges. And this last 2 years, we've been facing pandemic. Even though now we are at the endemic stage, we are still faced with a lot of challenges, especially in terms of building materials. So recently, REDA, with the cooperation of Sunway University, we did a survey among property developers, and usually this property survey on the real estate industry we share with the public. So this was done even during my time as president of REDA, and recently, I think, end of last week, the current president actually shared the findings of the property and real estate survey. So I would like to break this into what are the challenges. There are a lot. Definitely there's a lot. But I would only like to share the top 3 or 4 challenges that among 187 property developers who participated in that survey. And number 1 was actually cost of doing business. Cost of doing business have actually gone up. And on average, depending on state, it's gone up between 13 to 17%. And you have the compliance costs and you have the development costs. Tan Sri Likim, you just now mentioned about history. I remember when I started in this industry in the late 1989, 1990, I was working for the state government, a Selangor state government subsidy called Kumpulan Perangsang. And I remembered at that time when we prepared a feasibility study, and if I were to give anything below 40% margin, I remembered my group MD will throw the paper back at us. Okay? 40% margin. Today, you know, there's so many developers here. I think all of us would agree that if we can make in the teens, 17, 18%, you know, we're not even talking 20% anymore, 17, 18%, we'll be quite happy. True? There you go. So it's gone more than half in terms of margin. When you talk about compliance costs, this last 30 over years, it's gone up probably at least 3 to 4 folds. It used to cost 4 to 5% of your total GDP. But today, it's 18 to 20%. When you talk about land premium, when you talk about the facilities that you have to surrender. You know, when you buy a piece of land for 100 acres, at that time, you can develop 60% of that land. In the year 1990 onwards, this went down to about 51, 52%. Then 2010 went down to 50% or even lesser. Today, when you ask property developers, most of us are developers, most of us are in the real estate game. I think most of you will tell us or tell me that your net current saleable area is below 45%. Is that true? Why? Because today you have to surrender land for everything. Schools, places of worship, Dewan Orang Ramai, clinics, hospitals, and so forth. These are all costs. And these are the ones that are being passed back to developers. Before this, we have been asked to surrender land. But now, in certain cases, we found out that we are now supposed to build these schools. Yes, don't be surprised. We are asked to build these places of worship. We are asked to build facilities such as Dewan and so forth. So, as much as we would like to see progression, but every year there is so many toll gates are being put onto developers to actually fulfill the social needs which are supposed to be the government's responsibility. You know, we are not going to run away from our responsibilities, but there must be a limit. You know, I always ask this: when you buy a car, you buy a national car, Proton. You know, I'm a Bumi. I asked my brother here, Adzman and Nabeel, you get 7% discount when you buy a car? No, you don't get. You know, but in property, you do. We are fine with that. I think when you talk about Bumi, quotas and whatnot, yes, we have accepted at 30%. But when you go beyond that, you are taxing somebody, because this is cross-subsidy. You are taxing the other 70% or the other 50% who doesn't get these subsidies. So cost of doing business is the first thing that developers have found that's gone up. The other thing also on the cost of doing business is the slow rate of approvals. This has been a bane among developers. We've been talking before this. It took us 18 to 24 months to get the approvals. You know, we have to pay interest between the day that we buy the land before we launch it to get all your approvals, paying of premium, paying everything. You know, I was recently called by the new government asking, why does it take so long to get approvals? And I told them, it's no more 18 to 24 months. It's actually 24 to 36 months. After pandemic, it's actually 24 to 36 months. Can you imagine how much money, how much interest you have to pay? And here we're being asked to lower down or make properties more affordable. How do we make properties more affordable when the process of getting approvals are getting longer? Yeah? And they ask us how many agencies or authorities are involved. A minimum of 22 to 23. That was my answer. Starting from, because land is a state matter, from state government, then you have local councils, then of course you have the utility companies, and of course when you go above a certain acreage, you still have to go back to federal government. So these are things that, that's the first challenge that property developers are seeing. Second one is actually increase in building material prices. I think everybody have been talking about this. We know currently, yes, we understand that the government is facing a huge debt. I think we've been told that the government is carrying 1.5 trillion ringgit in terms of debt. And just to service the interest per year, it costs the government 46 billion. So 46 billion ringgit just on interest. This is not talking about subsidies and whatnot. When you talk about steel prices, pre-pandemic, then it went up so high. I think most of us are used to be paying about 2,800 ringgit per ton. And then early last year, I think most of us had to pay 3,800 ringgit per ton. So it's gone up, what, about 40%. Then it came down, but still, the steel prices have increased by 23%. Cement prices, 22%. Aggregates, about 18%. And during our get-together with MBAM, which is the Malaysian Builders Association, they have said that the construction costs have gone up on average by 17%. That's a lot of money. I have to remind all of us that prices of houses have not increased as high as this. You increase it more than 5%, first of all, there will be no buyers. And second of all, the banks will not give you the end financing. Bricks have gone up by 22%. Thirdly, the current challenge that we're seeing is the end financing issue. In our last 6-month survey, we found 86% of respondents in the Radar and the Sunway University Property Survey in the second half of 2022 and the market outlook for 2023 face financing problems for their projects, especially for the buyers. 86%. What is the rate of approval? When we meet up with ABM, the Association of Banks, they told us that the approval rate is 77, 78%. When we told them 77 and 78% is after filter, after filter, after filter. And we told them that the approval rate is actually less than 50%. They didn't agree with us. Of course, we take it for the first time house buyers. The first guy who comes in and the loan is rejected, we report as a rejection. But to the banks, if you're rejected once, you go to another bank, you get a lower margin of financing, you still get the financing. That's why they said the approval rate is 77%. So there's a discrepancy between us and the banks in getting what is actually the rate of approval for end financing. 77 and 47, it's a lot of, there's 30% discrepancy, okay? Okay. And then, well, what are the main topics, what are the main criteria that the banks have rejected or whatnot? First of all, this doesn't come from us. This was done, like I said, in a survey done by Radar Institute and Sunway University. Number one, banks requesting more documents. Number two, the bank capping loan amount unreasonably. And number three, ineligibility of buyer's income. Well, this has been going on for years. We've been talking about ineligibility of buyer's income. This is definitely a topic which will take a longer time for us to talk about because this is a systematic economic system. Yeah? You cannot talk about just property per se. This is about purchasing power of Malaysians. So we have to increase this. And the last challenge, well, like I said there's a lot, but I only want to touch 4, is the lack of workers. We understand that the new unity government have approved 800,000 foreign workers coming in throughout all sectors. However, in the construction industry, which during pandemic have lost 750,000, that's how many of foreign workers that have gone out, that we've trained over the years. When they come in, they are farmers, they don't know anything. Then we train them to become carpenters, bar benders, tilers, whatever. When pandemic came, on record, it showed 750,000 construction workers. A lot more went out, but on construction, 750. How much has been approved? 800,000, the government said, and we saw 171,000 workers coming in until January 31st, a month ago, right? 171 for total. We need construction workers today. Maybe we don't need 750, but we definitely need about 400 to 450. And 171 is total. That means for plantation, for manufacturing, for F&B, service, and so forth. Yes, Datuk Christopher did mention about looking at IBS. I used to sit on CIDB, and I had to try to get people to do and adopt IBS. And yes, the adaptation of IBS have gone up, but it's only gone up very little. Why? Because there is not enough incentives. Government must give incentives. If they do not have the capacity to give it in terms of financial, they can give it in other terms. Higher plot ratio, faster approvals, maybe talk to the banks, you know. If you use IBS, if you were to take ESG, green financing, lesser carbon footprint, give them better financing, give them better density, plot ratio, so forth. Government doesn't have to come up with money. But these are the incentives that I think we are looking at. We are looking at not only IBS, but also at sustainability. Moving forward, we've got no choice. You know, climate change is happening anywhere, everywhere in the world. We are worried about the international conflicts that's happening between Ukraine and Russia. Tan Sri Michael was mentioning between the States, United States and China. But yet, this climate change, which is happening everywhere, we've got floodings, we've got landslides, even in our own country. Southern California, there you go. Nabeel was saying, you go there, it's white now. And not to mention 2 weeks ago, the devastation that happened, earthquakes in Turkey and Syria. Yes, certain things are God's will and whatnot. But if it was, the building were to be done to a better standard or better code, more steel, better structure, probably the death toll wouldn't be as high. So these are the four main challenges that I think we developers, we real estate players are facing. But moving forward, that's not all bad. How do you think that we can make the property and real estate industry slightly better? The government just had their budget like 3 days ago. Again, I understand there were not many things that were given to the property and real estate industry. I don't think there was any catalyst that was given to actually make the property and real estate industry suddenly become the flavor of the month. Again, you cannot blame them. Like I said, 1.5 trillion in debts, 46 billion ringgit to service interest per annum. But there are other ways, like I said, non-financial, that the government could give to make sure that the property industry is in a better footing. First of all, I would like to ask the government to re-look back into reintroducing HOC, the Home Ownership Campaign. This is very important. The Home Ownership Campaign, when we were facing the pandemic, the sales was only at 23% of what we did before that. I'm talking about, of course, this is our first time, I mean new houses. But when we talk about secondary houses, obviously this figure will increase. So introduce Home Ownership Campaign again, not only for the new houses, but also for secondary houses, right? Because it will help the economy, it will help the market. There's definitely a difference between a good loan and a bad loan. You know, bad loan is when you buy a car. You buy a car, you leave the showroom, it goes down by 20%. But in property, it is probably the most, the biggest capital expenditure that a person will make. But the appreciation, in most of the times, will also be there. Tan Sri was just saying he was selling his land at what, 8 ringgit per square feet. Today it's 250 ringgit per square feet. Okay, 30 years down the road, but which bank wants to give you how many times compounded interest? Nobody. Who wants to give you 8 to 250? 60 times. Nobody. Don't say 30 years. Even longer you can't get it. Secondly, I would like to see a proper reintroduction of Malaysia My Second Home. Malaysia My Second Home was the first scheme in Southeast Asia. I remember that time Tan Sri and myself, we were founding directors of a company called MPI, remember? Malaysian Property Incorporated, I think that was done in 2001 and 2002. And we came out with this incentives to get foreigners to come in. 10 years visa-free, you have to spend more than 10,000 ringgit, and so forth. And this was a success at that time. Then various governments came, and they tweak it, retweak it, and made it impossible. And as Dr. Chris was saying, it became ridiculous. And until now, because I asked this question recently, what is the current policy of Malaysia, my second home? I said they'll come back to us. So please, make sure to have a more consistent and aggressive Malaysia, my second home program. So that's the second one. Number three, to make the real estate market to move forward, we would also, I've mentioned this, is to give proper incentive to green building projects. I'm also the chairman of the Malaysian Green Building Council. But when I try and talk to our fellow developers, they say, it costs us, hey brother, cost me 20-30% more just to put in the green features. And we are not getting any upside on it, unlike Singapore. In Singapore, when you want to rent a green building, you know you have to pay 30 to 50% higher than a conventional building. But in Malaysia, it's the same. Whether you are silver or gold or platinum, very little, or either there's none or very little difference. So incentives must be given. Again, non-financial things that government can give. I mentioned it before, higher plot ratio, lower financing from the banks, which the banks are already doing. But give not only to the developers, give it to the buyers as well. So buyers of green building will be paying lesser interest rates. So again, lesser carbon footprint. This is what we should be looking at. And lastly, I think Malaysia somehow have lost its niche. We have to find what we want to do. At one time, we were the capital of Islamic finance, of Asia even. Today, you hardly hear, it's too late for us to become the financial capital. I'm finishing. But financial capital of Southeast Asia. That honor has gone to Singapore, let's be honest. Right? But to be the Islamic financial capital of Asia, to be the wellness center of Southeast Asia, to be the EV center. Okay, maybe we can't fight with Indonesia because they got lithium and whatnot. That's why Tesla is going there. But to be the EV center of something. So we have to find our niche. Look back at our niche, concentrate on that, focus on that. You don't have to be good in 20 things. Let's be good in 3-4 things, and let's focus on that. And lastly, providing proper affordable housing. I think, I've always said this, for more than 30 years, should be the government's role. Yes, the private sector will work, we will surrender certain our land, but in providing, it should be the government's role. You can see recently there were talks about saying, why is our current Minister of Housing and Local Government going to Singapore to look at HDB? Like it or not, even before this, I started in this industry. I think that time the minister was Tan Sri Ting Chui Pei. So it's been a bit more than 30 years, right? And even then, we saw the HDB had the model. But the Malaysian government, or the state governments in Malaysia, must realize providing affordable homes, decent, quality affordable homes, is a losing concern. Anywhere in the world. HDB, loses 2.5 to 3 billion Sing the last 2-3 years. They don't make money, okay? They make money from URA, selling of land. But in developing, they lose. But they provide quality, decent, affordable housing. This is something that the Malaysian government must realize. You cannot do affordable housing and try to make money out of it like they tried with Prima. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So I think for now, these are just the 4-5 points I want to make, and I will try to answer any questions later. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Datuk Seri, for giving us a very full picture of the problems besetting the industry and some of the issues that we can address moving forward. I'm going to ask, let me see, third on my list is Nabeel, who has a short slide presentation.
Yeah, we've put together a few slides. I think Tan Sri and Datuk Sri, given their vast experience, spoke at okay, forward, back, okay, I can do that. The slides we've got just focus more on future-proofing, and they're I guess more of a micro picture. But you know, why is future-proofing important? Well, it's to ensure the relevance. You know, we build properties for 30, 40, 50 years. But as you know, as some of the other panelists have said as well, it's lifestyle's changing, technology's changing, everything's changing so quickly right now that you know the longer we can use these properties, the greater utility we get out of these properties, both for developers and investors. And I think for developers, one of the challenges is that I think many buyers don't realize the need or even the ability to future-proof a property. When they go to buy property, more often than not, you'll see that they focus on their requirements today. You know, and 10 years down the road, they're stuck in a home, or you know, they're stuck owning an office building that's very inflexible, and they can't do a whole lot to change it. So I think we'll be sharing the slides, so I'm not reading exactly off of them, but hopefully you get the key points. Also, it's, you know, what causes the need, I suppose, for, you know, for future-proofing, or where did these changes come in from? Well, one level is, you know, on a political level, as has been mentioned, economic and political level, you know, national policies, local government policies, state policies, also investment trends. You know, we as an industry, as we've said, we're reliant on the bank financing, which is something that, for the most part, decisions are made completely outside the, you know, outside the realm of the property sector. But then we have to operate within that framework. Social changes, and we saw this, I think, very strongly during the pandemic. I think probably the you know, the changes we saw in lifestyles and, you know, cultural norms and what is sort of acceptable, I think probably has changed more in the past 3 years than I'd say almost any possibly 3-year period in recent human history. And of course, technological changes. I mean, there's this ChatGPT thing is just, it's absolutely incredible. The things that, I mean, I understand now they're university students who are having these things write their papers for them. And so now they have apps that can actually detect if ChatGPT has written a paper for you. So then what you do is you get ChatGPT to write the paper, then you take that output and you put it into another app to disguise the fact that you had AI write the paper. So it's you know, it's quite incredible, the pace of change and, you know, the things that we all have to sort of keep up with and keep abreast of. I mean, the growing use of technology, I guess, has made our lives easier. A few examples of how few properties can be future-proofed, or how, you know, for example, if you look at how our lifestyles have changed over the past few years, there's, I suppose, coming out of the pandemic, there's more of an emphasis, it seems, on physical and mental health, or I think we appreciate that there should be. And, you know, we see this, we did a study of sort of office occupiers in KL and what they're looking for post-pandemic, when, you know, when it wasn't quite clear what the future of the office was going to be. And we found that there was a greater, among office workers, there was a greater focus on sort of physical, mental health, and things that, you know, as far as office space, we never really thought about before, which was like proximity to, you know, parks and nature. Previously, when we leased out office space, all anyone wanted to know was, you know, where my staff can have lunch, how many parking bays are you going to give me? But now there seems to be sort of a more holistic focus on, you know, on just the physical and mental health of the workers that are coming to work in these places. With flexible working, you know, convenient management of your home. I mean, these days with, I guess with technology, it's easy. You can work pretty much from anywhere. I think the most challenging part of working from home these days is probably convincing your boss that you're actually doing work when you're not in the office. But you know, it's opened up a whole new realm, a whole new lifestyle. You know, all sorts of opportunities for people. And even though, you know, I think we went into lockdown March 18th, so we're sort of 2 weeks shy of 3 years since the first lockdown came into being. But the changes we've seen in sort of lifestyle and people's attitude towards work and how they work and when they work, I don't think that, you know, we're not going back to how it used to be. I mean, companies, I think a lot of companies have tried to force people back into the office, and while most people are back in, it's still, I mean, I can't imagine we're going back to the sort of, you know, the sort of work styles we had before, where I think you know, when I moved to KL, what was 13 years ago, I think back then, Datuk Chris, we used to say, you know, when you're laying out an office, sort of one workstation per 150 square feet roughly, you know, and that was a bit generous, but we talk about one workstation per 150 square feet. I think, you know, coming towards the tail end of 2019, we worked on a couple of projects where it was one workstation for sort of 70 square feet. And on top of that, you'd have, you know, hot desking of like 1 to 1.3 or something like that. So you were fitting in the same staff member that was getting sort of 150 square feet on average 13 years ago is now getting 40% of that. So I think that there's also been a pushback against that. You know, we talk about assisted independent living, just the elderly. I think Malaysia, again, when I moved here, we were talking something like 5% of the population was below the age of 65. That population's aging now. And so as the population continues to age, how do we provide homes, or how do we provide accommodation that is able to sort of, you know, is able to, I guess, allow for everyone to live, you know, beyond retirement or beyond whatever, in a manner that doesn't sort of require, you know, shipping your parents off to an old folks home, which, I mean, I don't really see that taking off in our culture anyway. So how has business and work evolved? I think most of this I've touched on, the technology aspect of it, hybrid, flexible working. We've seen an increase in, for example, demand for data centers, driven by e-commerce, demand for logistics, again, driven a lot by e-commerce. And I think also during the pandemic, people got used to e-commerce, I think, in a way that, you know, in Malaysia before, I'd never seen sort of that. I mean, we had people in the office who were ordering durian online, and it was just getting delivered. And it, you know, it seemed like the most natural thing, but if you look back a couple of years before that, I mean, it was just something we couldn't even think of. And I mean, we've talked about, I mean, everyone talks about ESG. And I think when we talk about ESG, it's become one of these catchphrases. I think that while I sometimes question how great an understanding there is of ESG, but certain aspects of it, I think, are, you know, it's undeniable. We cannot escape the fact that it is increasing in importance. If you look at the larger sort of Malaysian, you know, the funds, the GLCs, the likes of your EPFs, your PNBs, they are moving very quickly towards not only having their own ESG sort of policies, but towards meeting some very challenging, you know, standards or very challenging goals. But within that, you know, there are ways, as Dr. Sui mentioned, of, you know, just focusing more on sustainability, things like, you know, green certification's been around. I mean, I think the GBI came out probably about 10 years ago. The GBI, wow, that long ago, yeah. But now, now we've got green leases. We've got wellness certs, which the WELD certification. I know that 118. I know that they were looking at. It's not just about greening the building now. It's about the actual quality of the workspace that the staff get. What else do we have? Again, some more selected features of future-proofed homes and offices. I guess the question we looked at. Maybe I can just move forward one. Okay. So we recently managed a portfolio of office buildings for a large domestic investor, and a lot of these buildings were, they were bought over different times over a 30-year period, different in quality, and I think what happened is that. When we came in, we were suddenly looking at these buildings where, we operate in an environment now in the office market in Greater KL where you've got 30% vacancy, right? So within that, with new buildings completing anywhere between 3 to 5 million square feet a year, and once these buildings are complete, landlords putting them on the market, they have to fill up the buildings, right? So it's sort of these grade B, grade C buildings that are suffering, and I think we were faced with a situation where we were trying to take these older buildings and make them relevant. And what that sort of highlighted during that point was, things that probably during the design phase or even for this investor when they're acquiring the buildings that didn't seem like a very big deal. But, in hindsight, it's always 20/20. But looking back, what could have been done with these buildings, or what could you do with, for example, an office building today to make it, I guess that little bit more relevant. We've talked about the the ESG credentials, the green features, but it's just the more flexible your space is. Large floor plates, regularly shaped. If possible, column-free. The challenge is, I think, with most of what at least we've highlighted on this slide, is that it comes at a cost, right? Future-proofing, unless it's very clever, future-proofing isn't free. So then you have to sort of decide what you're going to spend money on while you're trying to sort of predict what's going to become important 10, 20, 30, 40 years in the future. But, for example, we've had, I think, when used to be, and it still is in parts of Greater KL, parking, commercial parking, one parking bay for every 500 square feet of GFA. We're told that as the MRT, the future lines, line 2, line 3 come online, that the parking requirement might be rolled back and you may not need as much parking. Well, if you've got a building that's 20 years old, what do you do with that? What do you do with that space? At the time, I suppose if you sort of, if you've done something like, building the parking levels, for example, to the same height as your typical accommodation floors like office or resi or whatever, you could convert them. But, we'll see a lot of buildings. And again, it's a cost consideration where the parking floors will be lower. So you're sort of stuck with those. There's not a whole lot you can do with that. Or, there was a building where we sold a building, this was last year, that was converted into a data center. And, so it was a conversion of an old office building. And I guess one of the factors that made it attractive to the data center operator, they said, was that when the building was built, for whatever reason, the foundations were for a much taller building. And at the time, there was some apparently discussion at the developer side that, there may be some extra floors that could be added in the future. So when the building was sold, while the floors weren't added, what it did is that it allowed for the additional floor loading that they needed to make the building sort of work as a data center. I think so some of the challenges, I think, I won't spend too much time on this. I think it's mostly been covered. Regulatory policy changes. Again, Malaysia, my second home, is a great example. It was very popular. People are signing up, and for something like Malaysia, my second home, which, a lot of my relatives, for example, from Bangladesh have done it, people are making lifetime decisions based on the expectation that this program will remain consistent. So if you suddenly change the requirements or you suddenly change the hurdles, it causes a lot of disruption. And I think it also creates this sort of, unfortunately, this perception that the powers that be cannot be relied upon to sort of, stick to the plan, as I like to say sometimes. Cost, we've mentioned that. future-proofing stuff, a lot of the stuff is expensive. You may not get the sort of acceptance from the market right away. The great technology, I mean, technology changes on a daily basis. Buildings don't, unfortunately. And so there are a number of changes, but I think it's not necessarily a matter about getting it all right, but let's try and get some of it right. And I think, even with small changes over time, I think it can, it's sort of add up to really being a meaningful sort of difference in the quality of the build spaces that we have. That's really it. I think the conclusion, again, future-proofing is very important. I mean, ESG has taken on such importance, I would say, over the last 3 years even. We see, if you're, I mean, so we at Savills, we have an investment management entity that operates globally called Savills Investment Management. And they are of the opinion by 2030, if you don't meet ESG sort of, basic ESG sort of requirements, that you probably have difficulty getting even a loan to acquire property. This is for commercial investors, but it can't be overstated the importance of ESG. Life cycle costs of a building. When we look at a property purchase, I think sometimes even when we look at developing a building, we tend to focus more on what's it going to cost to build the building, and not necessarily, what is it costing over the life cycle of the building. Some of these green buildings are more expensive to build, but it saves you money over time. And especially now with some of the geopolitical conflicts we're seeing, with energy, just energy scarcity is a genuine risk right now. And I don't think it's been that way for a while. So anything that makes us more efficient. Adoptable buildings, I think I've touched on this. And technology. I mean, you can do more on an app today than you could probably do with a 10-man property management team 20 years ago. So it's, yeah. And I think that's about all I had as far as prepared.
Thank you very much, Nabeel. Last but certainly not least, as I said earlier, we'll give the floor to Tuan Haji Adzman.
Thank you very much, Datuk Chris. Yang berbahagia Tan Sri Makayo, President of KSI Strategic Institute for Asia Pacific. Yang berbahagia Saudara Datuk Firdaus Musa, President of FIAPSI Malaysia. My fellow panelists, Datuk Sri, Tan Sri, and ladies and gentlemen on the floor. I'm very humbled by the presence of all the great captains of industries here on the stage and off the stage as well. And basically my presence here is actually for the extension of invitation to Royal Institution of Surveyors Malaysia, whereby I'm actually the Deputy President, and we represent the 4 disciplines in the industry, which is the quantity surveyors, property surveyors, land surveyors, and building surveyors. So indeed, in fact, future-proofing the housing and property industry is a concern to our profession and also the disciplines. Since I think all the main points have been in fact covered by my esteemed fellow panelists, I do not want to repeat them, but I would like to just pick up a few points, bring it down to the grassroots a bit. The most important point I can see today being repeated quite a number of times is the keyword sustainability. Okay, sustainability, and I would imagine that sustainability is in fact the way that we need to look at when we are looking at future-proofing our housing property industry as well as our economy. Okay, and if we were to look at the point of sustainability, I like to also relate it to the 3 stakeholders. Okay, the 3 stakeholders who would be very concerned and related to sustainability, namely the authorities, the policymakers, the developers, of course, the producers, and of course the consumer, the public themselves. Now, of course, when we look at sustainability, it means a lot of things and different as well to different people. To the authorities, for them, it's to come up with policies to show that they are actually pushing the national agenda and also international agenda. And there's a lot of policies being made to ensure sustainability in developments and also in the economy. Now, when we talk about the developers are looking at sustainability as a form of approach in order for them to ensure that their future projects are actually more or less cost effective, and at the same time also hoping that they will meet the GBI requirements, okay, and win awards, okay, sorry to say that. But for the consumers, let's bring down to the consumers. To the consumers, it's about their future. Having to spend their lifetime, if you are talking about house buyers, property buyers, they are spending their lifetime savings on an asset which they hope one day will actually be inherited by the future generations, their family members. At the same time also, they are hoping that they are able to stay in the house or the property and afford to keep the property. Now, this is why I move on to the word affordability. Okay, sustainability is more or less related to affordability. And when we look at the affordability, a lot of people are saying affordable in terms of purchase price. That's what they're trying to say all the time. It's affordable, it's below 300,000, it's only 270,000. Why don't we, why don't we invest? But little do they realize, the purchasers and even the investors, that affordability is not only in the purchase price, but also in the cost of owning the property in the long term. And this is where a lot of concern has been overlooked to ensure future-proofing the ownership of property by purchasers. And this is where we need to have a quick look at what are the challenges that the people who have actually bought the properties have had to face. Now, everybody would imagine that with affordability, that means we can own properties within our means. If you have below 15,000 in household income, yes, you can apply for the affordable housing. But once you purchase the property and you occupy them, be it built by the authorities or by the developers, we start to occupy the property and start to incur cost on monthly basis. Now, a lot of people have not factored in the cost of maintenance charges, sinking fund, and also the cost of capital expenditure in the long term for certain things like, upgrading the building and also maintaining the common property. And this is where the increase in cost, especially the latest announcement by TNB, the tariff on commercial properties, such as service residences as well, will in fact affect the affordability of the future generations in the future. As utilities become more expensive, the developers will have to come back and relook, at how they can make developments energy efficient, for instance, less maintenance cost to be incurred, and also at the same time, less worry for the purchasers when they actually stay in those properties. Now, the biggest concern we have at this point in time is the fact that I've not come across, personally, I've not come across any developments which have not had defects, namely interflow leakage and party wall leakage. And leakage has been costing millions of dollars in the market, and it's causing a lot of owners a lot of headache. Be it in the first 2 years of the defect liability period, or even latent defect. And this has cost the market a lot of expenses. And this is where, if the developer can come back to the drawing board and make sure the design and also perhaps the workmanship to be properly done, and avoid this issue of burdening the future generations. I can see that almost most of the new buildings will have stains within a few years. I, being a professional property manager myself, this is our constant headache when taking over. And the first thing we have to address is leaking roofs and leaking floors. Okay, so I think this is a very valid point for us to look at. We can talk about the challenges that the developers are facing in terms of the compliance costs. We can talk about the government, now Plan Malaysia is planning to say, okay, 1,000 square feet for every affordable housing. But will that make it affordable to the people or to the developer to build? There's a lot of issue here when we talk about the affordability, and we should not miss the point. And the point is, it should be affordable to purchase and also affordable to own in the long term. So ladies and gentlemen, with the advancement of technology, AIs, we are talking about ChatGPT, we are talking about extensions to ChatGPT, which makes it very, very convenient for us to get data and to find data and to analyze data through data analytics. At the same time also, we have all features available to us. But do we have the right data to study all this? Now, this is where data in the market, to help us to look at sustainability and what we call affordability to be as accurate as possible. A lot of people do not realize the NAPIC data have not captured properties which have not been transferred, those which have not signed the MOT. So how do we project? Now, I do a lot of market studies for the last 10 years, and this is the struggle that we have. In order for us to actually provide a good study, we need the right data. We need the complete data, and we need accurate data. Okay, so a lot of things are missing here, for us to actually be able to look at the idea of a properly planned future in terms of our strategy to future-proof. And if there is lack of accurate data, or in fact, missing pieces here and there, definitely we have to address this. And I do not want to speak too long because I'm sure you're all dying to ask a lot of questions. And Tan Sri is back here with a number of questions as well. So with that, I'd like to just pass back to Datuk Chris Boyd. Thank you ever so much for listening.
Thank you very much, Haji. That was short and to the point. Now, come to the time where we really would appreciate some feedback from all of you here. Does anybody have a question you'd like to ask or a point of view? We've got mics dotted all over the floor. There's so many very interesting points being raised this morning, so many insights. Surely there must be some comment. Is anybody coming forward? I can see a gentleman. Yeah. Please give us your name.
Morning, panelists. My name is Ernest Azad. I have followed the discussions this morning. Each of the panelists have brought up certain aspects in the construction building industry. Now, the interesting thing is that when you talk about future-proofing of the housing and property industry, there are so many aspects of it, it's very difficult to start. Now, what I can do is to take just one aspect of it. My background, I'm not a developer, I'm not a contractor, I'm not an engineer, I'm not any of these things. I'm a lawyer, but I have been doing, my clients are all these people, developers, contractors, subcontractors, engineers, architects. So I have an insight, view, a knowledge of the problems faced by the industry. Now, I'm just going to address one issue only, the delay. I think Tan Sri Fateh had brought it up. That is the approvals, 22 to 23 different ministries have to give their approvals. In my personal experience, one of the difficult approvals is from Shabas. That's the water supply. There are other approvals. Now, the consultant who is putting in the plans, the development plans and all the other drawings and so on, they must be competent. They don't make too many mistakes, because if that's a mistake, it relates back to the developer. But having said that, in my experience, many projects have been delayed because of lack of approval or delay in the approvals. A delay is money for the developer, is detrimental to the purchaser. It could be detrimental to the contractor because they can't finish the job, and it's a chain reaction all down the line. So my suggestion, if any, is that this matter has to be tackled. And how it's be tackled? If we don't tackle this immediately, they've been going on for years, actually, I have my experience. So if we don't tackle this matter, what will happen is that I'll come back for the next conference and the same thing will be talked about again. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think you're quite right. I mean, this has been a perennial problem in the industry, and according to Datuk Seri, it's getting worse. Does anybody have any comments on that? Or can I ask Tan Sri?
Actually, kedaulatan undang-undang, and then keluhuran perlembagaan, follow the constitution, the law. In fact, our country law is so good, followed by British. Unfortunately, to me, the two problems of this: one, too many laws are not really followed, but many rule and regulation created not according to the law. If you think carefully, you go and check. So, and then coupled with actually corruption, actually too. We have to admit this. So, I think to take care of this matter is actually to really association, the association which must meet with the authority and really clear all the unnecessary red tape and the professionalism. Every project, there's also consultant. All kind of consultant had to put and to deal. And all this, actually, now income tax also got your self-declaration, you know. So actually, they too try to do this. But I think is the thing is not on the, they also, everybody know delay is no good. And why you keep on delaying. So I think the main thing is not on the matter itself, you know. If somebody put something on top, corruption is one of them. Certain thing you also hear, one, the money is paid, then quickly, approve. So I think it's also called cultural problem now. So I think my comments on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else have any comments on that? Is it that the existing system is slowing down, or are there opportunities to rework and revamp those systems? In some states in Australia, for example, you can convey property online, right? 24 hours and it's done. Bank loans can be approved in principle within 24 hours. And I'm sure there are many, many other areas in the industry that could benefit from a fresh approach.
Yeah, I fully agree. In fact, nowadays, we especially with the data, if you submit the plan, whether engineer sound or not sound, and actually all can be AI approved. You know, I think using technology to deal with the government and make sure the processing be on time, maybe is a good key thing.
Maybe I'll just add one or two more points, especially to Sheikh Shahjat's question just now. In Singapore, it takes 8 to 12 weeks for you to get approval, a proper development order. In Malaysia, like I said just now, it's anything between 24 to 36 months now. So can you imagine 8 to 12 weeks, 24 to 36 months? How much time, money we have lost? One of the things that you have actually pointed was the approval from Shabas. And this is a huge issue currently for developers and contractors in the Klang Valley. This is because the utility companies in Malaysia are monopolized by only one or two, or probably one. Who do you turn to when it comes to electricity? It's only TNB, right? For water, it's only Shabas. There's nobody else. So when they don't have enough capacity and there's no competition, probably sometimes the incompetency comes in. So on one hand, you want to see better competition, yeah? So people will be more aware of it. But there's definitely a lot of rules and regulations already there. The government through KPKT have started so many OSC 1, 2, 3, I think it's now OSC 5. OSC 5. OSC, I'm sure all of you know what it is, one-stop center. But in actual fact, there's only one word to it, stop. The center and one center, you don't, it's stop, that's the only thing. So it's been there. By right, if it could be done between 18 to 24 months before, it should be cut down to 6 months now, not increase it to 36 months. So this is something I think the federal government must lead by example, the state government must facilitate, and the councils must just approve once everything is in order. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any other comments? Would you like to ask some questions of our panelists? Yes, sir.
Yes, I'm Mr. Lim Pek Ling from Consulting Engineer. I'd like to address the issue on the delay. We, as an engineer, doing a lot of projects, some of our projects, like what you said, delay more than 3 years. And a lot of the time, being the consultant, you've been engaged day one, but there's no progress, there's no payment. Now, let's all be realistic. All these problems come from the root cause. What are the root cause? We never address the real root cause. The root cause is no accountability. And we did not hold those who delay account for it. Every little Napoleon can decide what is their timeline. Even though I was dealing with even JPP's fund, they have a guideline of 2 weeks to return back to you the comment. But that's only nicely put in there. Sometimes it could be 6 months. That's only one example. I'm also very disappointed that we never talk to the right person. We are supposed to have a Minister of Housing coming to this forum. He should learn and know what's the problem, and yet he's not even shown up here. And the organizer not even explain why I came, I waste my time, come here, listen to, we are talking about our own problem. But who's the real person that we need to know? Minister of Housing, this is affecting the country. So please, if you want to do anything serious, please accountable and also do your job. If you want to call a summit, make the summit real impact, not just talking for the sake of talking. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very good point. Yeah. It's come to the time when I need to wrap up the session, and I'd like to...
No, I think we have to be fair to the organizer.
Yep.
I want to respond to this.
Oh, sure.
The minister don't show up is not the event organizer's fault, I think. And also, in Malaysia, the problem of a lot of culture need to change. A lot of things we private sector do a lot of conference, prepare a lot of exhibition. The culture must get a minister, or sure must get so-and-so to come. So the question is, if they don't come, we found that, oh, this event is not the prestige. I know, to what you said, you write in a letter of your suggestion, pass it to me. When I see Nakomin, I also know him. I help him to pass on to him. This is what we're all united to do also. So we should, like what I said in the speech, are we united enough to really tell the government this is a very important industry that affecting so many. And we heard another thing, we're talking about financing, banking, as soon nobody asked. I want to really bring out this thing. It's not beside the government. Government is one thing we have to work. The other things, banking industry. I also Basel, now our national debt is 1.5 trillion. He said 1 trillion, we are in danger. Now 1.5 trillion. But 1.5 trillion is a foreign debt. It is foreign debt. That is very, very dangerous for this country. But I heard it's only 10%. I might be wrong. Might be. But meaning that it's also internal borrowing. And you can see the banking, the industry is actually they're just interested to take the cash flow, your cash flow only. As a property, to tell the truth, today, anybody here, banker, I give you 1 billion asset. He don't even want to lend me 10% of it because he said no cash flow. But I said we are in difficult. We borrow money, we build, then we build the cash flow, we pay you. This golden rule of the original capitalism, beautiful of capitalism, is gone. And this is what we also have to address. True or not? And this is what the unity government had to address. I know just now we bring a point, the unity government, I think they're back. You'll be in, you want to do a second TMB, like Singapore. You have alternative. So I think we still, whether you like it or not, I think to hold this event, I think we still have to give a big round of applause to KSI and don't get ourselves in fighting. Thank you.
Thank you, Tan Sri. I'm very sure KSI will take you up on your kind offer. Just very quick roundup of what we discussed this morning. Tan Sri kicked off. We heard about an innovative blockchain solution for the transfer of rights of ownership. And long may you continue to introduce and champion innovations in the industry, Tan Sri. Datuk Sri FD talked about approval bureaucracy, which seems to be a common theme amongst the entire industry, the costs, the end finance, which has been a problem since 2013, as far as I can recall, an overhaul of Malaysia, My Second Home, the value of green buildings, and the need for the government to really focus on those high priority items that they need to push through to future-proof the whole economy. Nabeel gave us some very informative slides on the changes in lifestyle, reminded us that this lifestyle involves both physical and mental, physical attributes and mental health. Talked about aging, the importance of ESG in our lives, which, as we all know, is being championed now by Bursa, so that every public company is obliged to set targets and report annually. The importance of flexibility in layout to future-proof a building, the challenges, and green loans. You mentioned green loans. Green loans are actually a reality now amongst banks. And Tuan Haji Adzman emphasized the need for sustainability, to look at the cost in use of a building, not just the initial cost, which comes back to the quality of construction and the choice of materials, and the ever-present need for more and better data to prevent those damaging property cycles and help the industry to know exactly what they should be building for the future. It's all about data and research. So with that, I'll close this session. Yes, that's his last
Actually, on this topic, I mean on the future, we all know it's 1.5 trillion, Is it a big problem for all of us? Yes or no? 1.5 trillion, big problem for us. So if we want to solve this problem, and it is true, 1.5 trillion is only less than 10% foreign debt. That means local, it's all local, owing to all the local bank. And if the local bank is not making the thing flow, cash flow of the country, I suggest put this task to Tan Sri Michael, since we answer his 3 questions. And what do you think is the best idea? That all the local banks will be nationalized. Then the debt is cut off. The country becomes so good. Thank you.
Okay, there's another visionary, innovative thought. Let's express our thanks to our speakers in the customary way.
Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.